I must begin by admitting that, for all the time I spent away from Baker Street, some part of me always wanted to return. There was something magnetic about that narrow staircase and the rumpled sitting room where Sherlock Holmes worked his strange magic. So, on a cool London afternoon, I found myself once again climbing the steps to 221B. Holmes was exactly as I remembered him, long and lean, bent over a chemical experiment, and looking as if he had not moved for hours. The moment he saw me, he greeted me warmly, but of course he could not resist showing off a bit. With a quick glance at my boots and coat sleeve, he announced that I'd been seeing more patients than usual and had taken a brisk walk before arriving. I laughed. That was Holmes for you. Before we could settle into conversation, he mentioned that he was expecting a particularly unusual visitor. He had received a note written on expensive paper, sealed with a symbol he recognized, and delivered by a messenger who refused to give his name. Holmes's eyes gleamed in that way they always did when a case promised to be interesting. A moment later, someone heavy and hurried came up the stairs. The door flew open and in stepped a man of enormous size, wrapped in a rich cloak and wearing a black mask. He looked like someone trying very hard not to look important, and failing. Holmes studied him for barely 15 seconds before saying, quite calmly, "You are the king of Bohemia." The masked man nearly jumped. Then, realizing he was discovered, he removed the mask and admitted Holmes was correct. He was soon to marry a young princess of a noble family, but a problem from his past threatened everything. Years before, he had cared deeply for an American opera singer named Irene Adler. She possessed a photograph of the two of them, and though she had never threatened him, he feared what might happen if she chose to use it. "Irene Adler," he said, "is a woman of the most resolute character." Holmes raised one eyebrow. "Then the matter is indeed serious." The king explained that he had tried everything to retrieve the photograph. Persuasion, bribes, even agents who searched her home. But Irene outsmarted them all. He begged Holmes to help. Holmes accepted the case with a quiet nod, and the king departed looking both anxious and relieved. The next day, Holmes disguised himself as a simple groom, and brought me to Irene Adler's neighborhood in St. John's Wood. The house was small but elegant, with a tidy garden. Holmes wandered about chatting with delivery boys, coachmen and servants, as if he had nothing better to do. It was extraordinary how easily he gathered information. Everyone spoke highly of Irene, kind, talented, and fiercely independent. While we kept watch, Irene stepped out of her house wearing a lovely traveling suit. A well-dressed man, Godfrey Norton, a lawyer, arrived at once. They spoke urgently, then rushed off together in a cab. Holmes followed in another cab, leaving me behind for the moment. Later, when he returned, his face was filled with excitement, and he told me the astonishing tale. He had followed them to a church in Marylebone, where they were arranging to be married immediately. The clergyman, however, insisted that they needed 2 witnesses. Norton saw Holmes enter and cried, "You'll do." Before Holmes could protest, he was standing beside Irene as the ceremony was performed. And just like that, Irene Adler had become Mrs. Norton. Holmes was thoroughly delighted, not upset at being swept along, but thrilled at how unpredictable the case had suddenly become. That evening, Holmes prepared another disguise, this time as a shabby workman with torn clothes and a smudged face. We returned to Irene Street just as the lamps were being lit. People lingered outside, chatting and strolling. Holmes blended perfectly into the scene. Around 8 o'clock, Irene's cab arrived. At the precise moment she approached her door, Holmes arranged a noisy scuffle with a group of young men. In the uproar he pretended to be struck hard and fell to the pavement. People rushed forward. Irene, seeing the injured stranger, ordered her servant to carry him inside. Holmes was brought into her sitting room. He lay still, pretending weakness, while his eyes secretly examined every corner of the room. The fireplace, the bookshelf, the ornaments, and a certain cabinet set apart in a way that drew his attention. I waited outside, watching for the signal. When Irene stepped out for a moment, Holmes whispered the phrase he had chosen. That was my cue. I tossed a special smoke rocket toward the window. Thick grey smoke poured out as people cried, "Fire!" The effect was immediate. Irene rushed into the sitting room and, without thinking, darted straight to the cabinet Holmes had noticed. In that moment of alarm, she revealed exactly where she had hidden the precious photograph. Holmes was more than satisfied. After the confusion settled, he slipped out with the crowd, met me down the street, and explained everything. When a woman thinks her house is on fire, he said, she runs to the thing she values most. We planned to return the next morning with the king to retrieve the photograph. At dawn, we journeyed with the king back to Irene's house. The neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet. When Holmes knocked, the maid appeared looking flustered. She told us Mrs. Norton had left the night before with her husband. She handed Holmes a sealed letter and said it was to be delivered to him if he called. Holmes opened it carefully. Irene's handwriting was smooth and confident. She explained that she had recognized Holmes the moment he entered her sitting room. A disguise might fool others, she wrote, but not a woman who had seen him in disguise before, something she had during his earlier spying in the street. When the smoke alarm occurred, she immediately understood the trick. Knowing Holmes would return in the morning, she and her new husband decided to leave London at once. She promised she would never harm the king. She kept the photograph only to protect herself, not to injure anyone. As a sign of peace, she left behind a different photograph, one of herself alone. The king read the letter slowly, then sighed. She would have made a wonderful queen, he said. Holmes simply asked for Irene's photograph as his payment. The king stared, surprised he wanted nothing more, but happily agreed before taking his leave. Holmes tucked the photograph into his pocket with a small smile. I think even he, who admired very few people, felt a rare respect for Irene Adler, the woman who had truly outwitted him.